Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Alrighty, am I on the air now? I'm now logged in with a different computer. I don't know if I am. It's hard to tell. I'm also on the website, and I'm waiting to hear something on the website. So if, Jules, if you're listening to this and you can hear me, aha. Good. All right. Now, boy, this is really rough. I'm sorry about this, folks. My name is Jerome, and I am the Sane Environmentalist. And I'm still waiting to see what's going on here. All right. So at any rate, I hope everybody's well today, and you're happy. This is rather embarrassing, it really is, that I somehow was sitting here talking away and unaware of that. We got a terrible connection. Very bad. I don't know, maybe I can get Lonnie Clark to So at any rate, let's talk about life in Eugene, Oregon. Life in Eugene, Oregon seems very good to me. I will do well here. It's just going to take some time to get established. So I ran into an interesting Eugene resident the other day. Good. And I'm sitting here chatting with Jules in this whole process, and now I'm sounding fine. That's good. Boy, what an embarrassment. So at any rate, moving on from that, I ran into a lady, and I'm going to interview her, and I put her on my YouTube channel, the interview. But she is a naturalist, tree lover, beekeeper, chicken raiser. To try to get her to do an interview with me, I basically went to her and said, "Hey, I'll buy you breakfast if you give me an interview. All the coffee you can drink." And she's like, "Well, no. But yeah, I like the idea of an interview. But if we're gonna do breakfast, then I'm gonna be cooking you breakfast because I've got organically raised fresh chicken eggs and good food." And I'm like, "Okay then." And I ran into her. She had a flat tire, and she had never changed a tire, and she was struggling with this thing. And she's a little person. She probably weighs about 100 pounds. And she was struggling with it, and I helped her to change the tire, and offered to help her with her bees if she needed any help, because she's a beekeeper. And she said, "Oh yeah, I do need help. I got a bunch of hives that I got to move around." So the Sane Environmentalist is going to learn how to move beehives this next week, as soon as we get weather warm enough through the day and night to where it doesn't kill the hive. Because what you have to do is you have to split. I guess you go in the morning and you split the hive in half, and you take half of it to the new location, and then you leave the other half open. And then that night, all the bees come back that are out and about to the hive, and then you go back after dark and you tape up the holes and you move the second half to the new location, and then reunite the two together. That's what I'm thinking. But bees are interesting, and she's having a hard time finding people willing to keep her bees. You know, people get afraid of bees. It's the strangest thing, you know, because bees have the potential to sting humans. Well, then all of a sudden they're evil or bad to a lot of people, and people freak out when they when a bee lands on them or comes around them, not understanding that freaking out is the very thing that's going to cause the bee to sting you. You know, I learned a long time ago that a bee will land on you and wander around and lick some of the salt off your skin and taste you, and then fly back off again when it figures out you're not a flower. Unless you threaten the bee, it's not going to try to sting you. Like, for instance, this last summer, or what was it, winter? I guess it was still winter. I was in Arizona, and my brother had a couple of little bird baths around the property, and for a period of about 2 or 3 weeks, there were literally hundreds of bees all swarmed around these bird baths, drinking the water out of the bird baths, because we're talking the Arizona desert, there's not a lot of water. And occasionally one would get into the bird bath, and you know, bees aren't the best swimmers, and they last about 10 minutes before they drown in the water. And so when they would get in the water, I would run down there and rescue them. And you kind of got to scoop them out and then just put them on dry land. And out of I guess it was at least 30 bees that I rescued that way, only one bit me, and that's because we both got bumpy, and we both were a little bit bumbly. And so he ended up getting scared and he stung me, and that's sad because that killed him. You know, I could see his little stingers sticking in the back of my, in the tip of my finger, and you could see it still throbbing. You could see it acting, having some sort of pump action going on. But I knocked it out of there real quick. It was no big deal. It was much worse for the bee. Let's put it this way. You know, imagine having a stinger permanently attached to your body, and if you ever stick it in, it'll rip off, and then you'll die. Imagine how painful that death would be. You know, don't assume just because insects are small that they don't have pain, just like we do, and pleasure, just like we do, just like any other living organism. You know, experiences well, not every other living organism, but every developed moving around thing has pleasure and pain. We need that. That's, you know, if you were just planted somewhere, you don't really need those senses to protect yourself. You know, let you know, oh, I'm wet, oh, I'm hot, oh, I'm this, oh, I'm that. You know, so, you know, I love bees and insects, and I'm very afraid for them at this point. You know, after my recent trip down the coast, I went through the forest. I just didn't see any insects. I was amazed. There was no insects in the Northwest forest. I dug a hand into the dirt looking for ants or something, or creepy crawly critters, or there was a couple earthworms here and there. But it's really sad. I just didn't see any, and I don't know. You know, I did a tide pool investigation video where we went to, and I think I talked about this yesterday as well, where we went to Neptune Beach and we did a survey for life on the outcroppings, rocks, tide rocks at low tide, and didn't see pretty much no life, not what I expected to see, not what the pictures show when you look for life in Oregon coastal tide pools. And I actually got yelled at. Somebody said that I'm spreading propaganda, just like Kevin Blanche and somebody else. And it's like, well, if it's true, it's not propaganda. You know, I'm not saying the entire coastline of Oregon is dead. Not by a long shot. I was saying, okay, here I am. I'm at the coast. I see this beach. it doesn't look like it's got much going on. And this person pointed out that it might be below the tide line, but there's no more rocks out there. It's just water, and the tide pools are at the top where they do get exposed to the air every day. That's part of the deal. So, somebody yelled at me. They basically called me a propagandist, and I don't know. I don't think that's propaganda. I think that I can actually call myself a citizen journalist and scientist, recording what I see. And this Sunday we are going to go back down the coast somewhere. And Lonnie says she was there a year and a half ago, and there were anemones and starfish and other things. And so we're going to go there this weekend and have a look and see if there's go to a place that was known to be alive and check it. And hopefully it'll still be alive and just as thriving just as much. I mean, that is my true hope. I think some of these quote-unquote environmentalists love to see eco damage because that ensures their job. I don't want to see eco damage. I don't want to be the one to report that I'm not seeing any tide pool life on this beach. I don't want to be the one to say that. I'm not. I don't have a vested interest, financially or otherwise, in doing this work. What I do this work for is because it needs to be done. I don't make any money doing this. I put up a link to my Patreon page on my YouTube videos, but I've only had one person ever give me money on my Patreon, and thank you for that. And you know who you are. So I'm not So I'm not a propagandist. Propaganda would entail a political motivation of some sort, getting people stirred up for the wrong reasons. Well, I'd say getting people stirred up because they are concerned about the environment and see a dead beach where there should be a live beach. I think getting people stirred up for that is a good thing, especially if there is a dead beach where there should be a live beach. And let's say, for instance, 10 years ago, those tide pools where I was wandering around the other day were completely and abundantly full of life. Well, what happened? What caused a change to occur where now the life has either migrated out of there or something? Obviously the ocean's not dead, but is it chemical poisoning? My first indicator would be chemical poisoning because Geiger tests of the area did not reveal any really elevated levels of radiation. And, I actually ran into this video, and it was this guy, and I think the video was called Fukushima Radiation, How Bad Is It? Or something, or What Happened with the Fukushima Radiation. And his argument was that basically many of the most dangerous radioisotopes have relatively short half-lives. And so, things like iodine-131 and cesium-137 and strontium-90 and these things don't last forever. Cesium and strontium both have a half-life of 30 years. Iodine has a half-life of 8 days. Plutonium-241, which will degrade, has a half-life of 9 years. What does that degrade into, and what is the half-life of that? I don't know. But there's a way you skip up and over one on the chart of the nuclides when you get a decay. So when something decays, it goes up one row and to the left one spot. And that's what it decays into. So this guy did have some very interesting scientific information about radiation and measuring. But then he went into this whole, and so they're actually lucky in Fukushima. They are lucky because it's already, because of the short half-lives of these things, much safer. And as long as you stay inside, you're going to be fine. You know, this guy's opinion of a radioactive soot cloud, smoke cloud, is if you just stay inside, you're going to be okay. It can't get in you if it doesn't get on you. And since it has such a short half-life, as long as you can stay inside for 30 years, or let's say with iodine, 8 days, you're going to at least need 10 half-lives. So as long as you can stay inside for 2.5 months after a plume of radioactivity goes overhead, then you're going to be okay. At that point, I disliked the video and changed to something else. But I did get a couple of interesting charts from the guy. And there is a time versus decay product chart. And that's why they have to cool down the fuel. That's why they have to pull it out of the reactor and put it in the spent fuel pool. Because it continues to decay. When they start the fissioning process, they created a huge amount of additional substances. A whole gamut of additional substances. And like this guy pointed out, that's what they want. They want those substances because they continue to decay, and then each decay produces more heat, which produces more power. And so it's a power reactor, and so what they want is the maximum number of decays per second without uncontrolled criticality. Okay, you want controlled criticality and the decay process that occurs with that. So, are the people of Fukushima now safe because it's been 8 years? Well, you can pretty much assume that all the iodine from the initial release is gone. And since the reactors have not been fissioning new radioisotopes, then probably all the iodine's gone by now. But that's it. I mean, there are some other short-lived nasties in there that are gone as well. But the cesium is still there. The strontium is still there. All the uranium and plutonium is still there. And will be for a long, long time. Like this guy, plutonium-241, 9 years, he says, so you take 9 years off of that, and suddenly you have what? Now you have what? It's going to be up and over one's lot, but it's still firmly in that radioactive band of substances. There's like a little bubble of radioactivity, and everything wanders from this bubble. I would like people to watch this guy's video just to be able to see on the chart of the elements how that works, how radioactivity works, and why substances become that way. Because that's kind of helpful if that's the sort of thing you're interested in. If it isn't the sort of thing you're interested in, then it's kind of confusing. So, that is what it is. But Fukushima is still dangerous. Just like always, I go to what's that guy's name? Corey. I can never remember this poor guy's name. And but he lives in Japan, and he has a YouTube channel, and he basically does videos with Geiger counters, and those Geiger counter videos. Kiana Muru, I think maybe is his name. Kiana Muru. Let's see if I can find him. I'm looking, Kiana. I think I've tried to find this guy. But if you find him on YouTube, then you can see some of his videos, and you can see that the radioactivity in Japan is not so much in the air anymore. It's pretty much now down at ground level. You can see that it is literally falling out. You know, it's falling out of the atmosphere. And I'm looking for this guy. I got too many damn subscriptions on YouTube. It's silly. They might have taken him down. Wow, look at that. I'm not seeing his channel. I think they took his channel down. They took his channel down. Can you believe that? So, there you go, folks. We're being censored. We are being lied to. The Japanese government does not want the people of the world to know just how radioactive Japan is, especially now that they're getting ready to have the Olympics there. I mean, they got a big thing going. You know, this is, it's very sad. You know, it's very sad that they're forcing the people now back into their filthy, polluted homes, which are still full of cesium and strontium. You know, and even little bits of fuel. There's little bits of fuel that when Unit 3 blew up, it spewed, and wow, this guy's, he's gone. Wow, that's so sad to me. So sad. I almost can't believe that, to be honest with you. That YouTube would cut this guy off like this. He had no audio on his videos. It was basically just him, and not even him. It was just a video of a Geiger counter, and that's it. And him wandering around, and he would give geolocation information, and you could see that the levels of radiation were very high still. Like on the big at 3 feet or so, okay, or 4 feet, we're looking at 0.6, 0.7 microsieverts per hour, which is high, but not burn you high or make you sick high. It is a risky high, but it's not. It's probably considered safe by the United States. But at ground level, it goes up to 50, 60, 70 microsieverts per hour. And so if you're a kid and you're sitting in the dirt digging a hole, the deeper you dig, the higher the radiation levels are going to go. If you are in Fukushima province and you live near a forest, the radiation levels are higher than people who live away from the forest. And so, as sad as it may seem, you may think, oh, look how beautiful and pristine this forest is. Well, the forest is going to give you cancer because it's literally radioactive because of that plume of soot. And you know, when Unit 3 blew up, I encourage all my listeners to go and look at video footage of that reactor exploding, okay, and see the literal amount of toxic filth that's spewed into the air right after the explosion, and the huge cloud of it, and how it just, that cloud was a heavy cloud. It had a lot of concrete dust and nuclear fuel in it, and other burnt parts and pieces, and every radioactive bit you could think of all mixed together. And that floated right across, and it deposited itself all across that, especially right north of the power plant, where they're moving people back to. Right north of the power plant was really horribly contaminated. And people don't want to go back. They know. I mean, some of the old timers are like, oh, it's perfectly safe. See, look, everything's fine. You know, what they're not pointing out is, oh, but there's really no more insects. Yeah, the insect life is gone, and you can't grow a garden because nothing will get pollinated. Think about how important insects are to the food chain. Bees. Think about how important bees are. Just bees. You know, if you had no bees, then you would have a much harder time pollinating food and seeds. And that is the base of the food chain, the biomass that is created, and the perpetuation of that biomass via seed, which is created. You know, so I don't think it bodes well for Japan. I think, like this nuclear apologist guy said, in 30, 90 years, 100 years, everything will be much better there. But I don't know if the poor Japanese people got 90 more years in them. You know, and what's to say we don't get another 9.0 earthquake and another tsunami in the next 4 or 5 years? It's not unprecedented, obviously. You know, so things there are not going to get better. They're going to continue to devolve and get worse and worse. People are genetically, and they are fiercely purist in their gene pool. The Japanese are. You know, they value their gene pool. You know, it's about the only way you can say it. Many people in the world would call them racists because if you interbreed, if you're a Japanese person, even with another Asian race, you're kind of shunned a little bit. I mean, in proper Japanese society, we like pure, real Japanese people, and I can understand that. You're on an island, you know. The reality of it is that your gene pool could quickly get contaminated and erased, you know, and intermixed with every other thing. And since there's only a few of you, pretty soon everybody's just a little Japanese, if that makes sense. So they are worried about that, and it is sad that these radioisotopes are damaging the DNA. They're literally making Japanese a destroyed gene pool, I guess you could say. They're destroying their own gene pool with the radioactivity that they've produced, that we help them produce because we're so helpful. It's like, here, let us help you. Let us first bomb you, and then let us give you some time-lapse bombs that'll go off eventually. You know, I just don't know about that. It's very sad. It is. So, the poor Japanese are going to suffer. And there's nothing we can do about it, and there's nothing they're going to be able to do about it. So, bees. Let's find something about bees. Mother Jones. Fairly decent source, I would say. Bees are having a really hard time right now. For about a decade, they've been dying at an unprecedented rate. Up to 30% per year, with a total loss of domesticated honey bee hives in the United States worth an estimated $2 billion. At first, no one knew why. But as my colleague Tom Philpott has reported extensively in the last few years, scientists have accumulated a compelling pile of evidence. Let me make this text just a little bigger, because it's just too small for my old eyes. There we go. Okay. Pointing to a class of insecticides. Hold it. My door just flew open. Insecticides called nanonicotinoids. These chemicals are widely used in commercial agriculture, but can have lethal effects on bees. Other pesticides are also killing many bees. So are invasive parasites, and a general decline in the quality of bees' diets. Clearly, that combination of factors poses a pretty serious problem for anyone who likes to eat, since bees, both domesticated and wild, are both in decline. They are the main pollinators of many major fruit and nut crops. The problem is so severe that this spring, and this is a fairly old article, President Barack Obama unveiled the first ever national strategy for improving the health of bees and other key pollinators. Now it appears that lurking in the background behind an ag industry-related problems is an even more insidious threat: climate change. According to new research published in this Journal of Science, dozens of bumblebees have lost their habitat, dating back as early as 1970, well before neonicotinoids were as widespread as they are today. Since then, largely as a result of global warming, bees have lost nearly 200 miles off the southern end of their historic wild range in the U.S. and in Europe, a trend that is continuing at a rate of about 5 miles a year. As temperatures increase, about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer today on average than in 1900, many plant and animal species in the northern hemisphere are shifting their range north. But by analyzing a vast archive of bee distribution records reaching back more than a century, ecologists at the University of Ottawa showed that bees are not joining in that trend. Instead of shifting north like many other species, the bees' range is only compressing in from the south, leaving less and less available habitat. That finding is illustrated in this chart that they have here. Kind of a crazy chart. So let's listen to what this lady has to say. So this is Mother Jones News, just so you guys know. Let's see if I can get her to play. Maybe. Just terrible. My computer is so quiet. I need some external computer speakers. Somebody out there has a set of decent computer speakers that they want to send to the Sane Environmentalist. I would certainly love that donation. At any rate, we can see the bees are having some real serious issues here. They're in decline. They're dying off at record rates. And this was an article from several years ago. Obama was still president. So they call it, here we go, colony collapse disorder, or CCD, is a phenomenon that occurs when the majority of worker bees in the colony disappear and leave behind the queen, plenty of food, and a few nurse bees to care for the remaining immature bees and the queen. While such disappearances have occurred throughout history, they were known by various names: disappearing disease, spring dwindle, May disease, autumn collapse, and fall dwindle disease. The syndrome was renamed colony collapse disorder in 2006 in conjunction with the drastic rise in the number of disappearances of western honeybees in North America. European beekeepers observed similar phenomenon in Belgium, France, the Netherlands, Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, and Germany, albeit to a lesser degree. And the Northern Ireland Assembly received reports of declining bees greater than 50%. Colony collapse disorder causes significant economic losses because many agricultural crops are pollinated by the western honeybee, according to the Agricultural and Consumer Protection Department of the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. The worth of global crops with honeybee pollination was estimated to be close to $200 billion in 2005. Shortages of bees have increased the cost to farmers because they have to rent bees to pollinate their plants. In the 6 years leading up to 2013, more than 10 million beehives were lost, according to the Center for CCD, nearly twice the normal rate of loss. To put this in perspective, according to the UN FAO data, the world's beehive stock rose from about 50 million in 1961 to around 83 million in 2014, which is about 1.3% average annual growth. Average annual growth has accelerated to 1.9% since 2009. Possible causes for CCD have been proposed, but no single proposal has gained widespread acceptance. Suggested causes include infections with Vora and other mites, malnutrition, various pathogens, genetic factors, immunodeficiencies, loss of habitat, changing beekeeping practices, or a combination of factors. A large amount of speculation has surrounded a family of pesticides called neonicotinoids as well. So let's look up neonicotinoids and see what they say about those. Neonicotinoids, sometimes shortened to neonics, are a class of neuroactive insecticides chemically active to nicotine. In the 1980s, Shell, and in the 1990s, Bayer, started work on their development. The neonicotinoid family includes, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the names of these chemicals. But they are the most widely used insecticides in the world, compared to organophosphate and carbamate insecticides. Neonicotinoids cause less toxicity in birds and mammals than insects. Some of the breakdown products are also toxic to insects. In the late 1990s, neonicotinoids came under increasing scrutiny over their environmental impact. Neonicotinoid use was linked to a range of studies to adverse ecological effects, including honeybee colony collapse disorder and the loss of birds due to reduction in insect populations. However, the findings have been controversial, and in 2013, the EU restricted the use of these chemicals. So it's a Bayer product. Yep. And they use a lot of it, mostly in the United States. They coat seeds with it as well. And so this stuff gets into the environment, and the bees eat and pollinate. They eat the pollen from the plants that have this neonicotinoid in it, and it makes them go insane. And they forget how to get back to the hive, and they die, and they freeze. Bees are very sensitive creatures, you know. And we are killing them off, folks. We're killing them. We're killing them as fast and as hard as we can. It's yet just another example of the short-sightedness of humanity and how we are, you know, the word that keeps coming out of my mouth is ASSHOLES. I just keep having to say that. Just about when I see this, the ignorance, when I see the literal disregard for life and for the fragile web of life, and the ignorance of some people who don't seem to understand that it's all connected. You can't kill just one thing and everything else will be fine. You know, it's like, people may wish, oh God, I wish there was no flies, but if all of a sudden there was no flies, your birds would be gone. If there's no mosquitoes, your birds would be gone. You know, your whole web of life depends on the basis and the beginning of it, and anything that's missing in between causes the whole web to collapse. So, yeah, honeybees. We've got farmers in the United States that have to rent bees, or they don't get a crop. Like, I'm sure in Oregon, it's a common thing. You know, and actually I will talk to the bee lady when I talk to her and interview her about that. You know, we've got lots of orchards here in Oregon, and nut orchards, fruit orchards, and I'm sure that all those things are pollinated by bees. And so probably if somebody has a few hives of bees, they can just truck the hive around from place to place and let the bees pollinate all the trees in that area, and then pack their hives up again and leave. And so that's what it's come to, because the wild bee population is gone. We're using neonicotinoids on everything, coating seeds with it even. That means it's in the environment. And it's gonna kill the base of the food chain. The very beginning, pollination of a flower is the very beginning of the food cycle. You know, that the bee eating the pollen on the flower is the beginning of the food chain. You know, that's the first thing that gets to eat, really, is the bees. And then the flowers get pollinated, produce seed, and then other animals can eat that. And that's where they get their protein and fat and other important nutrients from. So we're collapsing the beginning of the food chain. And here's something that we can really do something about. Spraying with this neonicotinoid poison. You know, there's something. So look up colony collapse disorder. There's a good article on Wikipedia. Again, climate change. Again, although ecological modeling and retrospective studies have been done, research has shown that there is a link between bee colony collapse and climate change. Although the shifting weather conditions themselves negatively affect bees, the link between colony collapse and climate change is also closely tied to the interaction between bees' climate niches and food plant reductions. Climate change affects the floral environment by stunting floral growth development and nectar production, which in turn directly impacts colonies' abilities to collect pollen and sustain themselves. As weather conditions shift due to extremely hot weather, they try to gather water to keep the colony cool. Climatologists have predicted that the occurrence of extreme weather events such as intense rainy seasons and prolonged drought will increase as climate change continues to change. Additionally, in regions that experience increasingly more rain, pollen will be washed away more easily, making it more difficult for bees to provide for their colonies. Meanwhile, in environments experiencing prolonged drought, flower environments may dwindle with dry weather. These patterns lead to less suitable and viable environments in which bees can thrive. A British journal published projections of plant diversity loss against spatial sensitivity. Okay, it's a study of the projections of plant diversity loss against spatial sensitivity, and they found major species loss in the southern part of the UK, forcing bee colonies farther north. Since it can take decades of studying climate change and tracking bee colonies to find any correlations between them, many researchers have turned to ecological modeling. In a Brazilian study, researchers investigated the impact that climate change would have on 10 endemic bee species in various future climate scenarios. It is known that moderate temperatures and relatively high humidity impacts flight activity and foraging behaviors in bee species. As a result, the scientists predict that in scenarios where temperatures continue to increase and humidity continues to decrease, the only suitable climate for bees in Brazil would be the more mountainous environments. The most optimistic scenario estimates climate change would still lead to a 5% reduction in these species populations. While this may not seem like such a large change, bees are very sensitive to effects of small population size. Small populations can lead to reduced genetic variability and decreased fitness. As a result of this sensitivity, fragmented habitat are less likely to support a viable population and may lead to additional colony collapse. From these models, researchers have also predicted that bee populations will start declining most significantly in the southern latitudes, with lagging ranges extending to the north. The study found that as the climate has shifted, bumblebees have been forced to operate outside of their thermal ranges, causing a range losses among the species' southern border. However, the study also found that while other flora and fauna have been expanded into northern ranges to account for the climate shifts, bumblebees have not expanded farther north. The most important finding in this study came from statistical models built to show whether or not these range shifts were due to confounding factors such as pesticide use or changes in land cover. The researchers found that climate change had the most meaningful impact on range shifts and bee distributions. To support these findings, the scientists note that the failure for the bumblebees to respond to thermal changes and expand their northern range underscores the idea that bumblebees are susceptible to climate change. One of the most significant studies on climate change examined the species B. Descendingus B. and Silvarium between 2000 and 2006 in the United Kingdom. The study showed that as the climate of Western Europe warmed, these two bee species experienced range declines and narrower climatic niches, pushing them into the fringes of their environment. Geographically and climatically, we expect this as climate change continues. Bees will move and abandon areas of drought and migrate towards the fringes, as this has already been seen within desert oases. Europe has done a significant work in tracking bee colony changes within regions. Additionally, longitudinal surveillance must be conducted in other regions of the globe among a wider array of bee species to build a body of research on the impact of climate change. So, as well, it looks like selective commercial breeding is causing a breakdown as well in the bee, in their genetic diversity. If you take away diversity, that's not good. Most of the focus on colony collapse disorder has been towards environmental factors. Colony collapse disorder is a condition recognized for the greatest impact in regions of industrial or agricultural use of commercially bred bee colonies. Natural breeding and colony reproduction of wild bees is a complex and highly selective process, leading to a diverse genetic makeup in large populations of bees. both within and between colonies. Genetic diversity through sexual reproduction is a significant evolutionary factor. It aids in resistance to parasites and infectious diseases. Many artificially bred species, especially domestic and agricultural species, suffer from a lack of genetic variation, resulting in increased heritable diseases, loss of vigor, and heightened uniform susceptibility to infectious diseases. There may be an analogy in artificially induced invasive ants, which replace native species by their ecological releases, and supercolonies, a manifestation of genetic homogeneity, only to suffer collapse of colonies attributed to lack of genetic diversity. Displaced indigenous species rebound from residual populations. Industrial agriculture has adopted simple breeding programs for uniform desired traits. The seasonal transportation of colonies over large distances further increases exposure. Please hold. All right, industrial apiculture has adopted simple breeding programs. That's the problem. And they transport the colonies over vast distances, and that causes increased infectious exposure from mixing of these domestic and residual displaced wild populations. Brood incubation conditions may be stressful with respect to deficient nutrition, temperature, or other basics. This combination of ecological factors, especially the host factor of loss of genetic variation and hybrid vigor, may account for the apparent multifactorial environmental causes of CCD, including concurrent infections. So we're homogenizing our bee populations because we want the ones that make the most and best honey. But by doing that, we are taking away their hybrid vigor. Thanks, folks.